A 59-year-old CEO went undercover in his own store to investigate poor morale. But when he found a cashier in tears and heard what her supervisors were plotting, the truth hit harder than he ever expected. Aldrich Pennymore had built his business from the ground up. 40 stores across 6 states, each bearing the sleek silver letters of Pennymore Department Co. His face had been in magazines, his words quoted in trade journals, and his handshake had closed deals worth millions. But on that overcast Wednesday morning in Dayton, Ohio, none of that mattered. No suit, no bodyguard, no limo. Instead, he stepped out of a rented Toyota Corolla, shaved his silver beard the night before, and wore a Navy store vest with a name tag that simply read, Doug. The moment he walked through the automatic doors of store number 27 on Needmore Road, Aldrich knew something wasn't right. It wasn't loud or chaotic, but there was something in the air. A tightness, the kind of silence that fills a room after someone's been yelled at. Eyes glanced quickly and looked away. Smiles flickered, then dropped. A cashier bagged items mechanically. A stock boy moved down an aisle like his shoes were made of bricks. 2 supervisors near customer service were laughing, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that welcomed people. Aldrich scanned every corner like a new hire trying to figure out where to stand. But really, he was listening, watching, feeling the energy in the place. He clocked in on the self-service tablet, using the fake employee ID corporate had generated for him. Doug P., trainee. Assigned to shadow for the day under assistant manager Delrick Corman, a guy Aldrich had never met, but had heard enough about from regional reports. At first glance, Delrick seemed fine. Tall, a bit too much cologne, maybe trying too hard. He offered a clipped smile and explained the basics. But when Aldrich asked a question about shift rotation, Delrick responded like someone who didn't like being questioned, especially by a low-level employee. Just follow the board, man. Nobody's got time to walk through kindergarten stuff. Aldrich gave a small nod. Not the corporate kind, but the kind you give when you're already storing that information for later. Stick to register training. Shadow Lanisha on 3. Register 3. That's when he saw her. Janelle Broxley. Early 20s, hair tied back in a tight bun. Neatly dressed. She moved quickly and kept her eyes on each customer with professional distance. But her face, it told a different story. Her eyes were red, not like she was tired, but like she'd been crying. Recently. Her hands trembled slightly when she handed over change. She fumbled with a receipt, apologized quickly, then smiled. A smile so forced it looked like a mask glued on. Aldrich watched silently, pretending to study how she scanned items. But inside, something twisted in his gut. He waited until the customer line died down and walked over casually. Hey, he said, trying to sound green and harmless. I'm Doug. New hire. She looked over, blinked like she hadn't heard him the first time. Oh, hi, Janelle. Just learning the ropes. You do this full-time? She glanced toward the customer service desk, where Delrick stood laughing again with another supervisor. Yeah, I guess. Her voice was polite, but guarded. Every word filtered, every glance checked. She wasn't just at work. She was walking through landmines. You okay? He asked gently. You looked, I don't know, like something's bothering you. She paused. For half a second it looked like she might say something real. But then her jaw tightened. I'm good. Just a long week. He didn't press. He knew better. But he filed it away. He hadn't even been in the store an hour. Already he could tell something was broken. But what he would overhear in the break room that afternoon would make everything click. And not in a good way. The store kept moving, but Aldrich couldn't stop glancing back at Janelle Broxley. She wasn't clumsy. She wasn't slow, she wasn't distracted. If anything, she was too careful, like someone always trying not to give anyone a reason. Her scanning was precise, her tone respectful, her uniform crisp. But there was something hollow behind her performance. Aldrich had seen this before. Not here, not like this, but early in his career, when he worked night shifts at a shipping warehouse in Dayton's South Side. There'd been a woman named Tasha who worked harder than anyone. Until the floor manager found out she was pregnant and started writing her up for things that didn't make sense. Tasha tried to hold on, until one day she didn't show up. Nobody asked why. Something about Janelle reminded him of that. He kept his role, watched, took notes in his head, and stuck close enough to register 3 to hear the small things. The way Delric called her Miss Broxley, with just enough sarcasm to make it sound like a joke. The way another cashier, a girl named Dree, tried to talk to Janelle during a lull and got waved off by a floor supervisor. "Save the gossip, ladies." Aldrich stepped in now and then, offering to carry baskets, bag items, help an older customer find dish soap. He kept quiet, but stayed close. Around 2:15, Janelle's register froze mid-transaction. "System error," she muttered. "Sorry, Mom, just 1 second." She waved down Delric, who walked over slowly, exaggerated like he had all the time in the world. "What now?" he asked, loud enough that 2 customers turned their heads. "Register's locked up again. It keeps freezing during cash transactions." Delric didn't look at the screen, didn't touch a button. Maybe if folks followed procedures, the system wouldn't be so touchy. Janelle blinked but didn't respond. The customer frowned. Aldrich kept watching from the next aisle. Delric reached over and unplugged the terminal, then plugged it back in. "There. Try again." It worked, but Janelle's hands were shaking more now. By the end of the next transaction, her lip was tight. Not in frustration, more like holding something back. When her break was called, she moved quickly to the back. Didn't talk to anyone. Aldrich gave it 5 minutes. Then followed. The break room was small, fluorescent, and smelled faintly of reheated soup. Janelle sat alone in the corner, sandwich untouched, staring at the floor. At the other table, 2 supervisors sipped coffee. One of them, tall, thin, sharp-jawed, was someone Aldrich had seen flirting with employees by the stockroom. His badge read Arlen. The other, short, broad-shouldered, with a neck tattoo just barely peeking out of his collar, was Darryl Pree, floor supervisor. Been with the company 6 years. Had a reputation Aldrich had heard whispers about, but no one ever filed anything concrete. Aldrich grabbed a granola bar from the vending machine and sat near the water cooler, back turned but ears open. He didn't have to wait long. "You see Broxley again?" Arlen said. "Low, but not that low. Girl been crying on and off since last Thursday. Told you she's not cut out for this job." Darryl snorted. "She's soft. All that I'm offended stuff. I told her flat out. Nobody's going to believe that HR mess. We already got her on 2 strikes. Seriously? 1 more. She's done. I told Corman to watch her shifts. Make sure something comes up." Arlen laughed. "You're cold, man. She's trouble. Thinks the rules don't apply because she's a single mom. Everybody's got problems." Aldrich clenched the granola bar in his hand until it bent. He turned slightly. Janelle was still sitting quietly. She'd heard them. She wasn't looking up, but her hands were gripped together in her lap, nails digging into her palm. The 2 men left. Business as usual. Aldrich stayed seated, waited. After a moment, he walked over. "You don't deserve that," he said gently. "Whatever they think you did, that's not how people talk about each other." She looked up, startled. Her face was flushed. "I didn't hear anything," she said quickly. "It's fine." "No, it's not." She hesitated. "You don't know what it's like here. They treat people like we're lucky to be breathing near a register." He pulled out the empty wrapper from his granola bar and tossed it in the trash. "I've worked places like that. I also know not everyone sees it. Until it's too late." She stared at him, suspicious now. "Who are you?" "Just another new guy. Name's Doug, remember?" he said, forcing a light smile. "But maybe someone who cares more than most." Janelle didn't smile back. But she didn't shut down either. That was something. But Aldrich was done just watching. He needed to know exactly what these supervisors were hiding. And for that, he'd have to dig deeper. By the time the sun dipped lower behind the Dayton skyline, Aldrich had decided he couldn't just play observer anymore. He needed to understand the full weight of what was happening inside store number 27, not just with Janelle, but the whole damn structure that allowed people like Darryl Pree and Arlen Maiden to hold power over others without anyone checking their behavior. He stuck around longer than he was scheduled, claimed Delric had told him to stay late and shadow the floor inventory guy. Nobody double-checked. Around 6:45 p.m., the store calmed. A lull in customers gave Aldrich the opportunity he'd been waiting for. He slipped into the back hallway and found the break room empty. He sat down in the corner again. Same spot. He knew the rhythm now. The supervisors didn't hold their meetings in offices. They talked in that break room like it was a bar where only insiders were allowed to speak freely. And like clockwork, they walked in. Delric, Darrell, and Arlen. Arlen closed the door halfway behind them but didn't lock it. Music played low from someone's phone. They sat around the small table, talking with the kind of confidence people only have when they think they're invisible. "She's going to snap soon," Arlen said, kicking his chair back on two legs. "I saw her wiping her eyes again after the old guy yelled about the coupon." "That's her game," Darrell replied. "Make herself look like a victim. Get sympathy. I've seen it before." Aldrich leaned in slightly. He could hear every word. His hands rested on the table, but his fingers tapped the underside slowly, deliberately. "She sent another HR email last week," Delric added. "Something about hostile behavior. I just forwarded it and hit archive. Ain't nobody got time to entertain that." "I don't get it," Arlen muttered. "Why not just cut her loose?" "Because we need it clean. You write her up again. Make it legit. She's late. She snaps at a customer. Bam! We're covered." They laughed quietly, but the kind of laughter that left Aldrich cold. "Anyway," Darrell said, "we gotta move fast. District manager's doing surprise checks again. Somebody upstairs is watching." Aldrich's eyes narrowed. He was upstairs. And here he was, sitting in the same plastic chair they used, hearing firsthand how they buried complaints and manipulated the system. It wasn't just apathy. It was strategy. Calculated cruelty under the mask of company policy. When they got up to leave, Aldrich slipped out the other door, circled back, and returned to the main floor like nothing had happened. He spotted Janelle returning from the loading dock. Her face looked drained. She moved as if every step cost something. He approached her again, this time holding a clipboard like he'd been sent to check on restock reports. "You heading out soon?" he asked casually. 10 more minutes. I got the closing register shift," she replied, not looking him in the eye this time. "Long day." "Every day is long," she murmured, then paused. "You heard them in the break room, didn't you?" Aldrich hesitated. He hadn't expected her to confront it directly. "I did." She looked up, and there it was. Anger, grief, exhaustion, all buried under the surface for too long. "Doesn't matter," she said bitterly. "No one ever cares. Not really. I do," Aldrich replied, voice lower now. "I care enough to come here myself. And I've been taking notes all day." She looked at him, confused. "What do you mean, come here yourself?" He realized then. He was starting to lose his cover, but not yet. Not until he knew everything. "I mean, I've worked in places where people thought no one was paying attention. And I promised myself I'd never let that happen if I could do something." "Why?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. "Why would you care? You just got hired." Aldrich didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. But he felt it. The moment was coming. She stared at him like she was trying to solve a puzzle, like something about him didn't line up. But before she could ask more, a loud crash echoed from aisle 7. Someone had knocked over a shelf of bleach bottles. A customer cursed. 2 floor staff rushed over. The moment dissolved. Janelle turned back toward her register, and Aldrich went to find the janitor. Because sometimes the quietest people in the building are the ones who've seen the most. But Aldrich had no idea that the janitor was about to hand him a piece of truth he wasn't ready for. Something even deeper than policy failures. It took Aldrich about 10 minutes to find the janitor. Name tag said Harold Benning. Early 60s. Moved slow, but not because he was tired. More like he took his time with everything. The kind of man who kept a folded handkerchief in his pocket and used his words sparingly. Aldrich found him near the utility closet by the employee entrance, pushing a mop bucket with the same care a mechanic would give to a vintage car. "Evening," Aldrich said. Harold gave him a glance, then nodded once and kept moving. "You work late often?" "Every day," Harold answered. No pause. No effort to be friendly. "I'm new here. Doug." Aldrich offered, extending a hand. Harold looked at it for a second, then shook it. Firm. Short. Harold? Aldrich didn't jump in right away. Instead, he walked with him for a minute, both of them silent as Harold cleaned a spill near the pet aisle. After a while, Aldrich said, "You see a lot in this place, don't you?" Harold paused, glanced at him. "You asking something in particular?" "That girl. Janelle. Cashier on 3. Harold leaned on the mop handle. "She's good, real good. Works double shifts, picks up extras, never complains, not to me. Always says hi. She having a hard time?" Harold exhaled, slow. "Let me put it like this. People don't cry on their break unless something's eating them from the inside. And she's cried more than once." That hit Aldrich harder than he expected. He'd hoped what he saw was an isolated moment. Harold kept going. "She made a complaint about Arlen. Not the first to do it, but she was the only one who didn't retract it. After that, they started treating her different." "How long ago was that?" "About 5 weeks. Since then, she's had disciplinary notices for clocking in 2 minutes late, for not smiling enough, for failure to meet pace expectations. Bull. All of it." Aldrich's chest tightened. "And HR never followed up. I don't think HR ever got it," Harold said simply. "Or if they did, they didn't want to." That confirmed it. It wasn't miscommunication. It was a system working exactly how some people wanted it to. Harold turned back to his mop. "I ain't telling you what to do, Doug. But folks around here stopped trusting anybody in a vest higher than shift lead." Aldrich's eyes drifted toward the front of the store. He could see Janelle's silhouette from where he stood. She was dealing with a difficult customer again, apologizing for a price discrepancy while the man raised his voice. "I think she deserves better," Aldrich said. Harold didn't reply, just kept mopping. 10 minutes later, Aldrich found himself back near Register 3. Janelle had finished with the angry customer and was organizing receipts. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes dull. "Hey," Aldrich said gently, "can I ask you something?" She looked up, hesitant. "What is it? You ever think about quitting?" Her expression shifted. "Every single day. Then why don't you?" She let out a dry laugh. "Because I got a 6-year-old who needs lunch money. Because my mom watches her while I work, and I can't ask her for more than she already gives. Because this job, messed up as it is still the only steady check I've got." Aldrich nodded slowly. "I get that. You don't, though," she said, not harshly, but with certainty. "You're new. You've been here, what, 2 days? I've been here long enough to see what happens when people complain. You don't get justice. You get punished." "I saw what they said in the break room." Her mouth tightened. "And you'll probably pretend you didn't, like everyone else." He looked her dead in the eye. "No, I won't." She stared at him. For a moment, something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. "You're not really some guy named Doug, are you?" Aldrich blinked. "What makes you say that? You ask too many questions. You act like you already know the answers. And nobody new gives a damn about some cashier's disciplinary record." He didn't say anything. "I don't know who you are," she said. "But you're not just some trainee. I'm someone who needs to see the truth. Up close. Without filters." "That's not an answer." "No," Aldrich agreed. "But it's the best I can give you right now." Janelle looked away. "Whatever. Doesn't matter. Just don't pretend like you're gonna fix anything." They always pretend, but Aldrich had stopped pretending a long time ago. What happened on the night shift would test everything Aldrich thought he knew, and Janelle would finally be pushed to the edge. The night crew clocked in around 8 o'clock p, and Aldrich decided to stay until close. It wasn't a plan, more like a gut pull. Something told him he hadn't seen the worst yet, and by now he'd learned to trust that instinct. He stuck close to the front. Janelle was still on Register 3, shoulders a little more rigid than earlier. She barely spoke unless spoken to. Not unfriendly, just done. Done with trying. Done with the mental acrobatics of pretending she was fine. Aldrich took up a spot near a returns cart and offered to clean hangers and re-tag items. The shift supervisor didn't ask questions. He just handed Aldrich a Sharpie and told him, "If it's dirty, toss it." 10 minutes before closing, a tall man in a leather jacket walked in. Loud voice, twitchy movements. Looked like he'd had a few drinks. or something stronger. He walked past the greeter without acknowledging them and went straight to Janelle's lane, even though 2 other registers were open. Aldrich stopped what he was doing and watched. Closely. The man dumped a stack of random items onto her belt. Energy drinks, a box of motor oil, a single sock, and 2 packs of razors. "Price match this," he barked. Janelle kept her tone professional. "I can match competitor pricing, sir, if you can show me the ad or link." "What, you think I'm lying?" His voice jumped a notch. "No, sir. It's just company policy. I need to verify it." He slapped a bottle down hard enough that it rolled across the belt and hit the plastic divider. "Are you being smart with me?" Janelle didn't flinch. "Not at all, sir. Just following procedure." Aldrich stepped forward, pretending to rearrange a shelf nearby, listening closely. He saw Delric glance up from customer service, but didn't move. Didn't say a word. The man leaned in. "People like you think you're better than everyone else. But you're just a cashier with an attitude problem." A customer in line behind him shifted uncomfortably. Another turned away. No one spoke. Janelle's voice wavered slightly. "Sir, if you continue using that tone, I'll have to call a manager." "You're gonna call a manager on me? For asking a question?" Then, without warning, he picked up the pack of razors and threw it down on the counter so hard it bounced off and hit the floor. That was enough for Aldrich. He stepped in quickly. "Sir, I think you need to back up and lower your voice." The man turned. "Who are you?" "Store trainee. Doesn't matter. You're making a scene and harassing the cashier. Time to leave." The man's nostrils flared. "You got a mouth on you for a trainee." Delric still hadn't moved. Aldrich took a step closer. "Leave the store. Now, or we call the cops." Finally, Delric arrived, moving with theatrical slowness. "Is there a problem here?" The man stared at Aldrich, then at Janelle, then back at Delric. "She got an attitude. That's the problem." Delric shrugged. "You heard the guy. Maybe next time. Keep it polite." Janelle blinked. "I was following protocol." Delric turned to her. "Then maybe next time you should read the customer better. If you escalate every little thing, this job's gonna eat you alive." Aldrich stared at him. "Excuse me?" he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Delric raised an eyebrow. "Did I stutter?" "No," Aldrich replied. "But you just showed me everything I needed to see." The intoxicated man grabbed his items and stormed out, muttering under his breath. The air was heavy. Customers avoided eye contact. Janelle looked like she might collapse right there. She grabbed her apron and walked off without another word. Aldrich watched her disappear into the back hallway. Then he turned back to Delric. "You know," he said calmly, "there's a difference between managing a store and managing people. You don't seem to understand either." Delric narrowed his eyes. "What's your deal, man?" "You'll find out soon enough." Aldrich walked away, tossing his name badge in the nearest trash can. But before Aldrich made any big moves, he needed one last conversation, because Janelle deserved the truth. Aldrich waited outside the employee entrance, leaning against the brick wall, the air sharp with that faint industrial smell from the loading docks. The night shift had started winding down, and he knew she'd come out soon. Janelle emerged a few minutes later, hoodie over her uniform shirt, arms crossed, backpack slung low. She didn't notice him at first. Her head was low, her pace brisk. "Janelle," he called softly. She froze, looked up. He raised a hand. "Just me, Doug." Then, after a beat, sort of, she stared at him, eyes squinting in the dull orange glow of the parking lot lights. "What do you want?" "To talk, just for a minute." She shifted her weight, but didn't move. "You saw what happened, and you saw what they did about it." "Nothing, I did," he said. "And I also heard what they've been saying about you behind closed doors. Let me guess. That I'm a problem. That I cause drama." Her voice was low but bitter. "They don't even try to hide it anymore." "They don't. But they're about to learn why they should have." She frowned. "What does that mean?" He hesitated, then took a breath. "My name isn't Doug. It's Aldrich Pennymore. I'm the CEO of this company." Her jaw tightened. She didn't speak. Her eyes scanned his face for signs of a lie. "I came here under a false name because your store's employee satisfaction numbers didn't match what corporate was being told. I needed to see it with my own eyes. She didn't say anything at first, just shook her head slowly, like her body needed a second to catch up to the news. You're telling me you've been pretending, watching, yes, and listening. And what I've heard? He shook his head. It's worse than I expected. Her shoulders dropped, but not from relief. More like defeat. You're gonna fire them? I'm going to do a lot more than that. Janelle narrowed her eyes. People have come through this store before. From corporate. They give speeches, they promise things, and nothing changes. I know, he said. That's on me. I let the system get too far from the people. I stopped listening. She crossed her arms. So what now? You go back to your office, write up a report, and pat yourself on the back for doing the right thing? He stepped closer, voice lower. You want to know what really made me come here? It wasn't the numbers. It was a letter. She blinked. A letter? Written by a part-time employee. It never reached me directly. It got lost in the shuffle. But someone in the IT department flagged it in a random audit. It was short, just 3 lines. She waited. It said, I don't need a raise. I just want to be treated like I'm human. Like I matter. Janelle looked away. That was me, she whispered. I sent that months ago. He nodded. I figured. Silence settled for a moment between them. Then she looked up. So what happens now? I go back to Columbus tomorrow. But I'm not sending a memo. I'm coming back next week. With auditors, HR, and legal. Quietly. No announcements. We're going to review this store top to bottom. And when we're done, there will be no more Delricks or Arlins left hiding behind their titles. She didn't smile. But she didn't walk away either. I don't want pity, she said. I want people to stop being afraid. You have my word, he said. But I also want your help. I need someone who's been in it. Someone who's seen the cracks. You want me to help you clean up your company? I want you to help me fix what I should have seen a long time ago. Janelle studied him. There was skepticism in her eyes, but also something else. The tiniest flicker of hope. You're serious? Dead serious. She shook her head again, almost smiling now. This is the weirdest shift I've ever worked. You and me both. A long silence followed. Then Janelle looked back at the store. I've got stories. More than you're ready for. I'll listen to every single one. But before Aldrich could make it back to corporate, he had to face the very people who'd let this culture rot on their watch. And they weren't going down quietly. By Monday morning, Aldrich Pennymore was back in Columbus, sitting across from his executive team in a glass-walled boardroom that felt colder than usual. Everyone knew something was off. His blazer was on, but he wasn't wearing a tie. His notes were on paper, not his tablet, and he hadn't touched his coffee. Across from him sat Loretta Duquesne, head of operations. Flawless posture, immaculate blouse. She ran logistics like a battlefield. Next to her, Rafik Bearden, the HR director. Calm, measured, good at saying a lot without really answering. To Aldrich's right was Stacey Norrell, legal counsel, who always had 3 folders ready and a pen that never ran out. Aldrich didn't waste time. Who approved the last round of store compliance reports for Dayton location number 27? Loretta straightened. I did. Is there an issue? Yes, Aldrich said. A big one. He turned to Rafik. How many complaints were logged in the last quarter from that store? Rafik flipped open a leather folder. 4. 3 were anonymous. 1 was formally retracted after mediation. Wrong, Aldrich said. There were at least 9. I saw 4 in one drawer that were never submitted to corporate. Rafik frowned. That would mean they were intercepted or filtered before upload. That shouldn't be possible. But it is. And it happened. Stacey glanced up. Do we have employee testimony or hard proof? Aldrich leaned back, letting the silence hang. I was there. Last Wednesday through Friday. I worked 3 shifts undercover. Loretta's mouth opened slightly. Excuse me? I shaved, dressed in uniform, and worked as Doug, trainee. I saw what they did to one of our cashiers. I heard what our supervisors said about her in the break room. I witnessed a verbal attack from a customer while the manager stood there and watched. And I saw how they punished her, not because she wasn't doing her job, but because she had the nerve to report harassment. Stacey put her pen down. Rafiq's hands froze over his pages. Loretta tried to form a response but stopped. Aldrich continued. I've been CEO of this company for 15 years, and somewhere along the way we got so big, so efficient, that we stopped listening. We built walls with metrics and dashboards. We traded human problems for percentages, and now we've got employees crying in break rooms while their supervisors plan how to push them out. On paper, so we look clean from a legal standpoint. No one brought this to my attention, Loretta said, voice tight. Because they knew how to hide it, and we made it easy for them. Rafiq exhaled slowly. What do you want us to do? I want a full investigation of store number 27. Quiet, immediate, and thorough. I want interviews with every staff member, starting with Janelle Broxley. I want Delric Corman suspended by noon. I want Daryl Pree and Arlen Maiden removed from the premises and barred from employee contact until this is resolved. And I want every regional manager retrained on complaint handling starting this quarter. Stacy looked up. And if they push back? They won't, Aldrich said. Because if they do, I'll walk into every single store myself until the message is clear. The room was silent. Loretta finally spoke. May I ask what you're planning to say publicly, if anything? Nothing, Aldrich said. This isn't about the press. This is about the people who keep our stores alive. They don't need a headline. They need someone to show up when it counts. He stood. Meeting's over. You've got work to do. As they gathered their things, Rafiq lingered behind. You really went undercover? He asked quietly. Aldrich looked him dead in the eyes. I stood 10 feet away from a crying woman while her supervisor mocked her to his friend, and I realized I'd never felt more ashamed of the name on that building. Rafiq nodded. Nothing else needed to be said. But Aldrich still had one more thing to do, because if change was going to mean anything, it had to start with listening to the one voice they'd all ignored. The next day, Aldrich returned to Dayton, not as Doug, not in disguise, but as himself. The ride was quiet. No assistant, no press team, just him and a folder of notes, most of which he wouldn't need. Because what came next wasn't a performance. It was long overdue. He walked into the store just after 11:00 a.m. and asked for Janelle. The woman at customer service hesitated, but pointed him toward the stockroom. She's helping out back. Got pulled off register this morning. Of course she had. He found her near the freight door, unpacking boxes with another employee. Her face froze when she saw him. No greeting, no smile, just careful calculation. Hey, Aldrich said. Got a minute? The other employee, a young man with headphones half in, quietly stepped aside. Janelle crossed her arms. So, you're not here to do price checks today? He gave a half smile. No, I'm here to ask you something. He held up the folder. I brought some questions, but I'd rather just listen. Really listen. She didn't say yes, but she walked with him anyway, to the same break room where he'd first heard her name dragged through a conversation like it was dirt on someone's shoe. They sat. The hum of the vending machine filled the air between them. You want the whole thing? She asked, eyes narrowed. Everything you're willing to share, Aldrich said. So she told him. Not just about the time Arlen made a joke about her hair and compared it to used Brillo. Not just about the write-ups that came in clusters right after she refused to laugh at Daryl's inappropriate jokes. She talked about the time she'd asked for a shift change to take her daughter to the doctor, and they told her, responsibilities come with priorities, then gave that same shift to someone who just wanted to catch a concert. She told him how she cried in her car before work, not because of the job, but because she knew the second she walked in, she'd have to armor herself. She had to smile when they disrespected her, had to stay polite when they lied, had to pretend she didn't hear the comments in the hallway, didn't see the looks exchanged between managers. She told him about the moment she considered quitting, and how her daughter, Lariah, only 6, had drawn a picture of Mommy at her job, with sad eyes and no mouth. Aldrich didn't interrupt once. When she finished, she looked down at her hands, twisting a rubber band between her fingers. So, what now? You fire a few people? Tell HR to write a memo? No, he said quietly. I ask what you need. She blinked. what you need to feel safe here. What would actually change something? Not for PR, not for numbers, but for you. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, I want a guarantee that nobody else gets buried for speaking up. I want the next girl who files a complaint to be heard without needing a CEO to show up. He nodded. That's fair. I want cameras in the break room, not to spy, just so people know there are consequences. I want a rep from HR, not someone in a different city, but someone here, weekly, someone we can actually talk to. He took notes, but not just on paper. And I want a reason to stay. I'm tired, Mr. Pennymore. I'm tired of fighting just to be treated like a person. He looked at her. What if I offered you a role that gave you a real voice? One where you help shape store policy for the entire district? She laughed under her breath. That's a joke, right? No, I'm serious. You've seen more than some people in corporate ever will. You know what's broken. I need someone like that close to me. I'm not corporate material, she said. I didn't even finish college. Neither did I, he replied. But I learned the hard way that credentials don't teach empathy. Experience does. She stared at him for a long second. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. As he stood, she added, If I say yes, I'm not sugarcoating anything. I'd be disappointed if you did. But the next chapter wouldn't just be about policy. It would be about rebuilding trust, one decision at a time. By the end of the week, the Dayton store didn't look different from the outside, but the energy inside had shifted. Delric Corman's nameplate had been removed, his office door left open. Corporate handled it quietly but firmly. No drawn-out process. The investigation turned up exactly what Aldrich expected. And more. Staff testimonies aligned. Written reports had been doctored, paper trails altered. It wasn't just about bad behavior. It was deliberate manipulation. Darrell Pree and Arlen Maiden were dismissed the next day. No last shifts, no warnings, just escorted out with HR and a regional manager present. Janelle didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply exhaled, like someone finally stepping out of a room with no air. In the background, Aldrich had already made calls to revamp their internal HR systems. Not a memo, not a retraining initiative, but a structural shift. A rotation of in-store HR representatives was being implemented across 5 cities. Small satellite offices with doors open, not emails ignored. Each representative would sit in on weekly staff meetings, not to intimidate, but to listen. The cameras? Already approved. Break rooms weren't private confessionals. They were shared spaces. And if people couldn't be respectful when they thought no one was watching, they didn't deserve the uniform. Janelle didn't ask for a promotion, but she got one. Her new title, District Experience Liaison, a role built from scratch. Aldrich created it with one thing in mind, to make sure no one like her ever had to cry behind a register again without being seen. She worked 2 days in-store, 2 days remotely, and had direct contact with regional leadership. No more filters, no more runarounds. But change wasn't just about policies and protocols. It was in the small things. Cashiers who'd once been afraid to speak were starting to talk again. The janitor, Harold, was offered a raise and a new set of uniforms. After Aldrich realized he'd been wearing the same shoes for 2 years without complaint. Rayner, the stockroom worker who quietly kept things running, got cross-trained for a supervisor role. The culture hadn't been repaired. It was still raw, still tender. But it was breathing again. One afternoon, Aldrich returned to the Dayton store unannounced. No disguise this time, just himself. He walked in, no cameras, no clipboard, just to watch. He saw Janelle talking with 2 newer employees, walking them through a refund protocol. She laughed, genuinely this time. When she saw Aldrich, she nodded once. A real nod. The kind people give when something's been earned, not handed out. He walked past her and found Harold near the back. You still mopping floors? Aldrich asked. Harold smirked. You still pretending to be a trainee? Touché. They shared a quiet chuckle. Then Harold turned serious. You did what you said. Lot of folks talk. You actually moved. I had to. That's the thing about power. It's only real if it helps someone else. Harold gave him a look that said he'd heard a lot of speeches over the years. But this one, maybe it rang true. Later, Aldrich walked through the aisles, just observing. Customers were laughing. Staff looked people in the eye again. As he headed toward the exit, a voice stopped him. "Mr. Pennymore?" It was a man in his 40s, medium build, short sleeves, holding a small basket. His daughter, maybe 8 years old, stood beside him. "I just wanted to say, thank you. My wife works here. She's been here 4 years. She came home last night and said it's the first time she hasn't felt scared about losing her job for speaking her mind. I don't know what you did, but thanks." Aldrich shook his hand. "She did it. I just finally showed up." The man smiled and walked off. Aldrich stood there for a second longer, watching, listening, not for reports, not for data, but for the thing he hadn't heard in a long time inside one of his stores: respect. But Aldrich wasn't done, not until every store, every worker, knew that someone was finally paying attention. 2 months later, Aldrich Pennymore sat at his desk at headquarters, looking at a report that, by all appearances, was a win. Employee satisfaction at the Dayton location had jumped 41%. Turnover dropped. Complaints? Fewer. But not because people stopped talking, because, for once, they were being heard. And yet Aldrich didn't smile. He stared at the numbers for a long time, then closed the folder and looked out to the window. You can build a company on vision, on ambition. But if you don't know what's happening in the places your customers and employees live every day, the loading docks, the break rooms, the corners of aisles where tired workers fake smiles, you're not leading. You're just performing. Janelle's words stayed with him. "I'm tired of fighting just to be treated like a person." He had read it in that letter, heard it in her voice, felt it in the silence that followed every hard truth she gave him, and he couldn't forget it, not because it shocked him, but because he knew how many more stories like hers were buried in stores across the country. In the weeks that followed, he visited 4 more locations. This time he didn't go undercover. He walked in as himself, sat in on meetings, asked questions, not to check boxes, but to listen. One store in Louisville had a night janitor who hadn't had a performance review in 6 years. Another in Tulsa had 2 employees covering 3 registers every night, with no backup, because upper management wanted lean scheduling. A store in Akron had an assistant manager who'd been quietly mentoring teens from the neighborhood, buying them meals out of pocket when they worked double shifts. But no one had ever recognized him. It wasn't always about fixing disaster. Sometimes it was about acknowledging the quiet heroes no report ever captured. Janelle had agreed to speak at a district meeting. Not a speech, just a conversation. She stood in front of a room of 30 supervisors, most of whom had never met her, and she told them what it felt like to go home after a shift and coach herself not to cry in front of her daughter. She didn't cry during the talk. She was steady, clear, measured. A few in the room did, though. Afterwards, one of the more skeptical managers approached her and asked, "Do you really think things can change?" She looked him in the eye and said, "They already have. You just didn't notice yet." That stuck with Aldrich, because that was the lesson. Real change doesn't shout. It doesn't trend. It grows slowly, from uncomfortable conversations and quiet decisions. It shows up when a CEO gives up his name tag and listens like he's nobody important. It breathes in the moments where people feel seen, not for the first time, but for the first time in a long time. Aldrich stood from his desk, walked over to a framed photograph on the wall, his very first storefront, from decades ago. Back when he knew every employee by name and checked the bathrooms himself before opening each morning. He touched the frame lightly. Then he walked out of his office without his phone, without his planner, and headed for the elevator. Because there were still too many corners of his company that hadn't been heard from yet. And leadership, real leadership, meant going to those corners, standing there and listening. This isn't just a story about a CEO and a cashier. It's a reminder that the people closest to the problems often carry the clearest answers. If you've ever felt unseen in your job, unheard in your own story, let this be your sign to speak up. And if you hold power, even just a little. Use it for something better. Use it to listen. Subscribe for more human stories that matter and that could just change the way you